Happy birthday, Bruins. Still not sure if you're a playoff team, though.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Beat. Today is Monday, December 2nd, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Before we get started breaking down the storylines, stats, and signals from an up and down weekend for our Boston Bruins, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. Can't believe it is December already. There is snow on the ground, and the Bruins celebrated their 100th birthday yesterday in fine fashion, defeating the Montreal Canadiens by a score of 6-3. Unfortunately, the weekend began with a very disappointing game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. The good news was the Bruins scored 7 goals this weekend. The bad news is 6 of them came in the win over Montreal, and they were able to only muster 1 goal against the Penguins in a Friday night loss. So altogether, the Bruins only picking up 2 points against 2 of the Eastern Conference's worst teams so far this season. Thankfully, they got the 2 points against Montreal, although they did make it a bit more interesting than it had to be. Montreal brought it back to within 2 goals on Sunday. But the fact that they lost to Pittsburgh on Friday kind of made it somewhat of a disappointing weekend for the Bruins, and I'm not entirely sure this team is a playoff team. Now, let's just say this. Sunday was, or the whole weekend, Saturday, Sunday at least, was pretty magical for the Bruins. It's always great to see franchise legends back in Boston. I loved anytime you see Willie around this franchise is a treat and something to be savored. The Bruins turning 100. He's been around for 89 of those years, and I don't think he's been celebrated enough for this franchise or as the NHL as a whole, let's say. He does have his number retired, of course, and always welcome back in Boston. But I just want to see Willie O'Ree get all the love. Of course, there were other franchise legends around, Johnny Busick, Bobby Orr, Ray Bourque, Phil Esposito, for example, Cam Neely, who's current team president. Always great to see these legends around. And if you missed the video that the Bruins posted on social media with the drone going from outside the arena all the way in, just a really special production there. Be sure to check that out. And all leading up to puck drop, where the Bruins did defeat the Canadiens by a score of 6-3. The Charlies came up big in that one. Both McAvoy and Coyle popping in 2 goals apiece. David Pastrnak ending a lengthy goal drought, thankfully, as well. And then after Cole Caulfield scored a couple for the Canadiens to make it interesting, Boston's Cole Koepke iced it with an empty netter to make it 6-3. So a special day. The bear statue that they unveiled outside of TD Garden, a beautiful thing. And everybody who visits, be sure to tap the paw there for some good luck moving forward, as we saw O'Ree and others do before this game. So after that one, of course, a lot of the players reminded of how special it is to play for the Boston Bruins. The captain saying the history of the game and this organization is something that they're very proud of. And to have a lot of alumni in the building and be part of the events, of course, is really special. Incredible to have them around. Joe Sacco, interim head coach, a local boy. He grew up rooting for the Bruins. He said, of course, they wanted to win on Sunday. They wanted to make the fans, the players of the past, and the current group as well proud of the effort more than anything. The score usually takes care of itself when you do that. And he thought the guys did a pretty good job of that today. You saw Charlie McAvoy, who, for my money, will be the next captain of the Boston Bruins. You saw him kissing the spoked bee, those beautiful jerseys. I really hope they bring those out, and that's the current look moving forward, or the permanent look moving forward. You saw him kiss the spoked bee. You can see the pride that he has playing for the Boston Bruins. Sometimes he said you take for granted how special it is, but they rose to the moment against one of their oldest rival. It's the 940th meeting between these two teams, most between two opponents in NHL history, and always nice for the Bruins to come out on top. Swayman said he thinks they've been doing the right thing for a long time. It was only a matter of time before they were going to get rewarded, and they continue to do this. They're going to take advantage of it. Some good practices coming up here. They got to take the positives and keep the nose to the grindstone. Now, again, unfortunately, it came after that complete stinker against the Pittsburgh Penguins. So they weren't able to make up as much ground as they should have. This was an easy 4 points for the Bruins to take this weekend against two teams that have been struggling so far this season. Two teams who still have the worst goal differentials in the Eastern Conference. Penguins at -28, Canadiens at -25 after yesterday's game. The Bruins still third worst, I should say, in goal differential at -16. Yes, they have shown improvements over the last number of games under head coach Joe Sacco, and the vibes were great following that victory over Montreal on Sunday. But the fact that they weren't able to take advantage of Pittsburgh on Friday, inexplicably making Tristan Jarry look like a Vezina Trophy candidate when he's been very bad all season long. The Penguins are a vulnerable team that can be scored on. The fact the Bruins only mustered one goal against them, and it was scored early on in that one, which I thought was going to set the tone for a dominant performance. But they didn't get a goal in the third period once again. They didn't get offense from their primary producers. Thankfully, David Pastrnak ended a goal drought by scoring on Sunday. Hopefully that gives him a boost and gets him going, because he's on pace for well under what we expect of him. And overall, it amounted to the Bruins still being out of the playoff picture here when you look at point percentage as we enter into the month of December, which is going to be a critical month for the Boston Bruins if they want to get back into the playoff picture. So an up and down weekend. So glad that they were able to win. If they lost on Sunday, it's over. Like, there's no coming back from losing to both Pittsburgh and Montreal. The fact that they lost to Pittsburgh was indeed bad enough, and we'll assess kind of where they stand here and some signals moving forward as we look at the week ahead as the podcast continues. Now, hopefully you all enjoyed this weekend's NFL action as well and got in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I don't know if you can tell, but my voice is strained a little bit this morning, and that's because I attended a concert over the weekend, the Arkells in Kitchener. Unbelievable show. And anytime I'm looking to go to a concert or a game or a comedy near me, I check out Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Turn in the all-in pricing so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and look at the panoramic view from your seat so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. Download Game Time, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but create that account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Game Time. What time is it? It's game time. All right, friends, let's discuss some stats and signals to be taken away from these weekend games, a loss to the Pittsburgh Penguins and a win over the Montreal Canadiens. I mentioned the 2 goals scored by Charlie McAvoy and Charlie Coyle. It was one of Charlie McAvoy's best games of the season by far. You had the 2 goals on 4 shots. He was a +4 in this one, and even got in on the action with a shorthanded goal against the Montreal Canadiens. Just a dynamic offensive performance from the team's best defenseman, and it's something that we hope to continue to see here as the Bruins continue, because while he does now have 5 goals on the season, it's kind of been up and down performance for him. He had a very hot start to the season, kind of dipped a bit offensive production wise, but then busted out with these two big goals here on Sunday. I mentioned Charlie Coyle. He also had a couple goals. The Bruins, of course, need sustained production from one of their top centers here in order to have some success. Coyle is now up to 7 goals, but only 1 assist so far this season. So we need to get that facilitation going as well here for Charlie Coyle. Overall, the Bruins now look to be in a good spot. If you look at the Atlantic Division, you see the Bruins have the 3rd most points among Atlantic Division teams. However, they've played 3 more games than the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are only 1 point back. So if you look at point percentage, the Bruins are actually in 4th now. 12-11-3 record, 27 points in 26 games, 3 points up on Buffalo, but with 2 more games played. And if you look at the Metro, the Bruins are behind 6 Metropolitan Division teams. So if you stack up these teams by way of point percentage in the Eastern Conference, the Bruins are down in 10th. So that's going to be a real problem when it comes to the wild card, because let's assume Toronto, Florida, Tampa are your top 3 teams in the Atlantic Division. You're fighting for a wild card spot with potentially 6 of the Metropolitan Division teams. Right now, you have the Capitals, Devils, and Hurricanes entrenched in the top 3 spots in the Metro. And then you have the New York Rangers, Philadelphia Flyers tied at 27 points. You have the Columbus Blue Jackets up there with 25 points, all of whom have better point percentages than the Bruins. And they all, except for Philadelphia, have positive goal differentials. The Flyers are at -10. The Bruins are at -16. So, again, if you look at the playoff picture right now, the Bruins are in the third spot in the Atlantic, but that's very deceiving because they're technically behind some teams. They're behind both wildcard teams at the moment, and they're behind Tampa Bay and Columbus when it comes to point percentage. So they have a lot of ground to make up here, despite the fact that things have been improving, to be sure, here under interim head coach Joe Sacco. I don't mean any disrespect by that, but that's just his current title at the moment. Over the last 6 games that the Bruins have played, they are 4-2, and they are 8th in the NHL in terms of point percentage over that time. 667 point percentage, earning 8 of a possible 12 points under head coach Joe Sacco. The defense has certainly improved. They're allowing only 1.83 goals per game over that span, which is tied for fewest over the past couple weeks with Utah, who's also allowing only 1.83 goals. So that's spectacular. Now, it's kind of been feast or famine, though, for the Bruins when it comes to offense. They're only 19th when it comes to average offense over the past 6 games, averaging 2.67 goals per game. And while they did break out with 6 goals against Montreal on Sunday, they also had a 6-goal effort against the Islanders last season. The first 3 games, they scored only 3 goals in 2 wins to begin Joe Sacco's tenure. Then they were shut out by the Canucks, and they lost 2-1 to the Penguins. So they've had these 2 games where they've scored 12 goals, but over the other 4 games, they have scored only 4 goals. So really, it's kind of feast or famine for this team at the moment, which is really keeping them from making up that ground. The power play has certainly improved under Joe Sacco. They were dead last in the NHL. Since then, they're 27th. So still struggling a little bit. The penalty kill, though, is second since Joe Sacco took over. Only Anaheim has a better penalty kill. They're at 93.8% success rate. The Bruins are at 93.3%. So that's been a really positive gain as well. The Bruins averaging 29.2 shots per game over the past 6 games, which ranks 13th. They're allowing only 24.3 shots, which is second fewest. So you're seeing some gains in terms of team defense. They're not allowing many shots against. The penalty kill has much improved, but the offense very uneven. They've had those 2 games in which they've scored 6 goals, but other than that, they're averaging 1 goal per game in the other 4 games. And again, losing to Pittsburgh on Friday, that was a game that you really needed to come out in and dominate. And they showed early signs by scoring within the first couple minutes, really. Or it was very early that they opened the scoring, but then they could not generate anything past Tristan Jarry, who's a very, very beatable goalie. Coyle scored 124 into the game, and then crickets for the rest of the game. They made him look like he was a Vezina Trophy candidate. He made 30 saves. Swayman does appear to be kind of back for this team, despite taking that loss against Pittsburgh. He's played very well over the past few games and looks pretty back, which is a good sign for this team moving forward. But unless they can get that offensive production night in and night out, it's going to be a real challenge for this team. And quite frankly, I'm not convinced that they are a playoff team. And especially with some teams surprising over in the Metro, your Philadelphias, your Columbuses. You have to think there's 4 teams that are penciled in to playoff spot in the Metro right now: New Jersey, Carolina, Washington, and the Rangers, even though they've been sliding and perhaps could be making some moves. In the Atlantic, you have Florida, Toronto, Tampa. So there's really one spot up for grabs here, with Boston, Columbus, Philadelphia, even Buffalo still in the mix, and maybe even Detroit kicking around. And they are the team the Bruins play next, a team the Bruins cannot afford to drop points to. And we'll discuss some signals to take away from these games and what's coming up this week here as the podcast continues. Prize Picks is a fantastic daily fantasy hockey option that you need to check out today. It's the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. So if you think Connor McDavid will get more than half a goal this week, or Austin Matthews good for more than that, all you have to do is go to Prize Picks, download the app, and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. Just download the Prize Picks app, use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. They now offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this season. Download Prize Picks, use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Our Boston Bruins have 3 games on tap this week, 1 at home, and actually 2 at home, 1 on the road, and a back-to-back situation. It begins Tuesday with a home game against the Detroit Red Wings. Then they will travel to Chicago to take on the Blackhawks on Wednesday, and then come home to host the Philadelphia Flyers on Saturday, a matinee game. All this before heading out west for a 5-game road trip that will see them take on 4 Canadian opponents and the Seattle Kraken. So it's a big week for the Bruins before they head out on the road. The Detroit Red Wings are still kicking around here in the East, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily a huge threat here for a playoff spot. They are 4 points back of the Bruins with 2 games in hand, but right now they are coming off a loss to Jake DeBrusk and the Vancouver Canucks. DeBrusk with a hat trick, 4 points yesterday to do the Bruins a solid and beat the Detroit Red Wings. They did pick up a point, but they're under 500 now at 479. The Bruins are at 519, so just above 500 now. But again, you look at goal differential, the Bruins, 2nd worst in the Atlantic, 3rd worst in the conference. A lot of that was from the pre-Joe Sacco era, but still, it's not looking amazing for the Boston Bruins because of those early struggles. It's going to take a lot of time for them to climb out of that negative differential, and typically teams with negative goal differentials do not qualify for the postseason. It's just a fact. And you can say, well, it's a different time now under Joe Sacco. There have been improvements made. I talked about the shot suppression, the goals that the opposition aren't scoring. But at the same time, the Bruins struggling still to make up ground. Right now, they're +5 in terms of goal differential under Joe Sacco, but you can't discount those first bunch of games where they dug themselves a hole. So you're looking at positives. They're taking steps moving forward, and the 2 games that they've lost were by very narrow margins. You could argue that they deserve to win the game against the Canucks They should have won the game against the Penguins. They could be 6-0 here under Joe Sacco. But the numbers are what they are. And the fact is they have played the most games among Atlantic Division opponents, and I believe almost in the conference as well. Only New Jersey has played more games, and they've got a 630 point percentage. The Bruins are only at 519. So there's teams below them that have an opportunity to make up some ground. So they can't afford to lose to Detroit. I mean, a lot of these games are, I don't want to say must win, but the Bruins, there's very little margin for error moving forward is basically the gist of it. You can't afford to drop points to teams that are below you in the standings. And they did that to Pittsburgh. They can't do it to Detroit. Certainly a team like Chicago, because once they play Philly on Saturday, they're going to be facing 5 pretty good teams here out on the road. Winnipeg, Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. That could be a make or break road trip here for the Bruins as we head into the 2025 portion of the schedule. So it's a big week for the Bruins. You're going to want to subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins so that you do not miss a thing. I'm going to be posting more regular shorts over on YouTube, so do subscribe over there at Locked On Boston Bruins. And again, it was very cool to watch the ceremony yesterday, to see all the fanfare around that. But it was kind of dampened for me anyways by the fact that they had lost on Friday. That was a game very disappointing to watch, and they needed to take to really solidify this turning of the corner under head coach Joe Sacco. Full credit to the Bruins. They came out on Sunday, took it to the Canadiens. But as many encouraging signs as there are, there's still this gap because of the tough start to the season, and because, quite frankly, there are still some holes on this roster that need to be filled, particularly on the wings, and you see that exacerbated by how good Jake DeBrusk has playing right now for the Vancouver Canucks. Anyways, that's it for today's episode, my friends. Do check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey next for all the latest from Steal and Flip to give you an advantage. I hope you all had a great weekend, especially those of you south of the border who had an extra long weekend. Mine was very fun. Went out on Saturday for that concert. The Arkells, one of my favorites. Yesterday, my birthday, went to see Gladiator 2, which was awesome. And came home, watched Landman, Yellowstone, the old Taylor Sheridan double feature on a Sunday night after watching the Bruins win, of course. And thank you for all the support, all the love. Please do subscribe if you have not already. And we'll be back tomorrow with a fresh episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.